Amaka stared at the overflowing laundry basket. It seemed like a never-ending chore, one that she had hoped to tackle earlier in the day. But work had been relentless, and by the time she got home, she was already exhausted. Now as she looked at the pile of clothes she felt a wave of frustration wash over her. It was Friday night and she had envisioned a relaxing evening, not one filled with household chores. It was Friday night and Tunde was late again. This had become a pattern, one that Amaka was growing increasingly tired of. She glanced at the clock, noting the late hour. Every tick of the second hand seemed to mock her, reminding her of the time slipping away. She had planned a special dinner, hoping to spend some quality time with Tunde, but it seemed like those plans were going to be ruined once more. The smell of her almost burnt fish stew filled the air, making her feel even worse. She had been so distracted by her thoughts and worries that she had nearly ruined dinner. Amaka let out a frustrated sigh, feeling the weight of the evening pressing down on her. She had put so much effort into making the night special, and now it seemed like everything was falling apart. The stew, which was supposed to be the highlight of their meal, was now a reminder of her growing frustration. She had imagined this evening differently, laughing together, a nice dinner, maybe even a movie snuggled on the couch. In her mind it was a perfect evening, one where they could reconnect and enjoy each other's company. But reality was far from her imagination. Instead of laughter and warmth, there was silence and an empty living room. The romantic dinner setup she had prepared now felt like a cruel joke, mocking her efforts. Instead, she felt tired and upset. The weight of the week had caught up with her, and the disappointment of the evening was the final straw. Just as she was about to give in to her frustration, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the quiet house, pulling her out of her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, she wondered who it could be. Doorbell rings. It was their neighbor, Mrs. Oladell. The elderly woman stood at the doorway, her kind eyes filled with concern. She had a way of showing up at just the right moment, offering a comforting presence when it was needed most. Amaka felt a small sense of relief at seeing her, even if it was just a brief distraction from her worries. "Mrs. Oladell, he's still at work, isn't he?" Her voice was gentle, filled with understanding. She had seen this scenario play out many times before and knew the toll it was taking on Amaka. The younger woman nodded, forcing a small smile. It was a familiar routine, one that she wished she could break free from. Amaka nods, forcing a small smile. She didn't have the energy to explain, and Mrs. Oladell didn't need her to. The older woman gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder before heading back to her own home. Amaka watched her go, feeling a mix of gratitude and sadness. It was comforting to know that someone cared, but it didn't change the fact that she was still alone, waiting for Tunde. A few minutes later, Tunde's key turned in the lock. The sound was both a relief and a trigger for her pent-up emotions. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure how to feel. The door opened, and Tunde stepped inside, looking as tired as she felt. He walked in, sighing tiredly, and dropped his briefcase on the floor. The sight of him, worn out from another long day at work, tugged at her heart. She knew he was working hard, but it didn't make the loneliness any easier to bear. Tunde looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "Tunde, sorry love. Meeting ran late." His voice was soft, apologetic. "Amaka, every Friday?" Her frustration spilled over, the words coming out sharper than she intended. She didn't want to fight, but the disappointment was too much to keep inside. "Every Friday, it's the same excuse." She didn't mean to sound accusatory, but it was the truth. Every week she found herself in the same situation, waiting and hoping for a different outcome. The cycle was exhausting, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep it up. Tunde ran a hand through his hair, feeling bad about missing another evening together. He wanted to make it up to her, but he didn't know how. The demands of his job were relentless, and he felt trapped between his responsibilities and his desire to be there for Amaka. The regret in his eyes was clear, but it didn't erase the hurt she felt. They stood there, both wishing for a way to bridge the growing gap between them. Dinner that night was tense. They barely spoke. "Tunde, how was your day?" Amaka, short, quiet answer. Later in bed, they lay with their backs to each other, feeling very far apart. Amaka, tears in her eyes. Tunde felt bad too. He wanted to hug her and say he was sorry, but he felt frozen. He was tired, but he was also scared. Scared of talking about their problems, scared of the problems he felt growing in their marriage. The next day, Amaka told her best friend Chioma everything. Chioma listened carefully. Chioma, You both love each other. But sometimes love isn't enough. You need to talk, Amaka. Really talk, and sometimes you need a little help to do that. Amaka started to feel a little hopeful. Maybe Chioma was right. The next week, Amaka and Tunde sat in a counselor's office. Mrs. Johnson, their counselor, smiled kindly. Mrs. Johnson, the first few times might be hard. You might cry, argue, and say things you've held in for a long time. But that's okay. It's part of getting better. It's important to talk about what you need, what you're scared of, and what you want. Not just to each other, but to yourselves too. As the weeks went by, things started to change. The air between Amaka and Tunde, once thick with tension, began to clear. They found themselves spending more time together, not just physically but emotionally and mentally. The park, which had once been a place of silent walks, now echoed with their laughter and conversations. Amaka and Tunde started to see their own part in the problems. They began to understand that their relationship was a two-way street, requiring effort and understanding from both sides. They realized that their issues were not just about the big fights, but also about the small, everyday moments that had been neglected. Tunde, I never realized how much my work stress was affecting us. I thought I was doing the right thing by working hard, but I see now that I was bringing my stress home, and it was creating a wall between us, Amaka, and I didn't see how my silence was making us drift apart. I thought I was keeping the peace by not bringing up my feelings, but in reality, I was just creating distance between us. They started to really listen to each other, not just hearing the words, but understanding the emotions behind them. They made a conscious effort to be present in their conversations, to put away distractions and focus on each other. They remembered the importance of small things, a smile, a touch, asking, "How was your day?" These little gestures, which had once been a natural part of their relationship, were now consciously brought back into their daily lives. Amaka, those little moments, they mean so much. Tunde, they really do. It's the small things that build up to create a strong foundation. Without them, everything else starts to crumble. Let's make time for each other again. They decided to prioritize their relationship, to make time for each other amidst their busy schedules. They started planning their days together, ensuring that they had moments set aside just for the two of them. They started having date nights again, just the two of them. These nights became a sanctuary, a time to reconnect and enjoy each other's company without the distractions of daily life. They laughed, they argued, they made up. They embraced the full spectrum of their relationship, understanding that it was okay to have disagreements as long as they worked through them together. They remembered why they fell in love. In the midst of their rediscovery, they found the spark that had brought them together in the first place. They realized that their love was still there, stronger than ever, waiting to be nurtured and cherished. One evening, Tunde took Amaka's hand. "Tunde, I'm sorry for all the times I put work before you, before us." Amaka, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry too for not telling you how unhappy I was." They talked for hours that night, and they made a promise to communicate, to listen, and to choose each other every day. Amaka watched Tunde play with their children in the park. The laughter of their kids filled the air, mingling with the rustling leaves and distant chirping of birds. It was a serene afternoon, the kind that made her heart swell with gratitude. She marveled at how effortlessly Tunde connected with their children, his playful spirit a perfect match for their boundless energy. Marriage, she thought, is like a dance. Each step requires attention, each movement a balance of give and take. Sometimes the dance is smooth and graceful, other times it's clumsy and awkward. But it's always a dance, a continuous flow of motion and emotion. Sometimes you're close, sometimes you're far apart. There are moments when you feel perfectly in sync, and others when you seem to be moving to entirely different tunes. The distance can be challenging, but it's also a part of the dance, a chance to find your way back to each other. It's about finding the rhythm together, learning the steps, even when the music changes. Amaka realized that the dance of marriage was not just about the good times, but also about navigating the difficult ones. It's about forgiveness, about understanding that mistakes are part of the journey, about giving each other a break, allowing space for growth and healing. It's about recognizing that both partners are human, with their own flaws and strengths. The dance requires patience and compassion, a willingness to see beyond the immediate and into the heart of the other. About choosing love, even when it's hard. Love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. It's a choice made daily, in the small moments and the big ones. It's about holding on, even when the steps are difficult and the music seems offbeat. As she watched Tundi and their children, Amaka felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that their journey together was far from perfect, but it was theirs. Every challenge they faced, every joy they shared was a part of their unique dance. Amaka knew their love story wasn't over. It was a story that would keep evolving, growing richer with each passing day. The dance would continue, with new steps to learn and new rhythms to discover. It was a story that would keep going, one chapter at a time. Each day a new page, each moment a new step in their everlasting dance of love.